The human fleet slid from hyperspace like embers breathed into the night, each hull rimed with frozen light from the jump. The Valiant's forward pane framed the enemy armada, distant but steady, crimson against the abyss. Admiral Kalen stood at the center rail, boots planted, hands clasped behind his back. Admiral Kalen said, "Hold formation, watch their spacing, small changes speak loud." Ensign Rhea's hands swept across a blue holographic map, her gaze sharp. "Ensign Rhea," said, enemy capacitors climbing, vector unchanged, deliberate pacing. Commander Holt scanned shield readouts, jaw locked against the deep hum of the reactors. "Commander Holt," said shields green, lattice holding firm. Kalen studied the enemy line, a red seam cut across the endless curtain of stars. Admiral Kalen said, "We do not blink first." A distant flare stitched across the void, thin as a drawn blade. Ensign Rhea said, "Contact fire, forward arcs." The bridge crew drew breath together. Admiral Kalen said, "Return fire, disciplined volleys only." The engine's thrum deepened, a heartbeat in steel, as plasma fire began carving bright wounds into the dark. The first enemy salvo rippled through the human line like a bell toll struck underwater, shields flaring pale against the dark. Admiral Kalen said, "Mark their cadence. Answer on twos. Make every shot count." Ensign Rhea's fingers drummed in time with the enemy's rhythm, her eyes locked on predictive arcs. Ensign Rhea said, "Cadence locked. They're adjusting spread, predictive solutions updated." Commander Holt glanced at the shimmering shield readouts. Commander Holt said, "Harmonic stable for now, but their aim's getting meaner." A warning halo swept across the viewport as another scar of light crossed the void. Kalen's voice was firm. Admiral Kalen said, "Lock and stagger. Keep our walls solid." Outside, interceptor drones banked in tight loops, their formations sharp as blades. In the hum of the bridge, humanity's defiance felt very small and completely unshakable. The enemy broke their wall, ships flexing into a long spear aimed at the Valiant's heart. Admiral Kalen said, "Bend, do not break." Ensign Rhea's hands moved without hesitation. Ensign Rhea said, "Vector deflection programmed, engaging field rotation." Commander Holt redirected systems with precision. Commander Holt said, "Power flowing to lateral shields. Let them scrape the edges, not our center." The hull vibrated like a taut string as the ship leaned on invisible currents. Voices overlapped, urgent but never chaotic. Kalen's eyes tracked the spear's point. Admiral Kalen said, "Return the courtesy." Measured volleys. Turrets spat plasma with cold precision, each shot shaving steel from the enemy line. Sparks flared in the void, tumbling away like winter seeds on the wind. The spear's perfect edge fractured, momentum bleeding into drift. A static hiss clawed across the comms, then cut to a voice, smooth and measured. Envoy Saris said, "Human command, stand down and parley." Kalen's brow furrowed. Admiral Kalen said, "Your timing is brutal, Envoy." The battlefield's light dimmed, not from ceasefire but from shock. Ensign Rhea's eyes flicked to her console. Ensign Rhea said, "Channel is authenticated, sir." Signal source, Concord flagship. Holt kept both hands on weapons control, knuckles pale. Commander Holt said, "We're one wrong breath from getting gutted. Why now?" The envoy's voice was calm but edged. Envoy Saris said, "Your extinction is a rumor we prefer not to confirm." Silence gripped the bridge, heavy as a loaded weapon. Admiral Kalen said, "Then speak, and make it quick. The stars don't wait." The envoy's image sharpened. Envoy Saris said, "We offer a corridor, brief, narrow, but safe. At its end a dead moon awaits. Come with courage or not at all." Kalen weighed the words as if they were coordinates carved into a blade. Admiral Kalen said, "We'll take your corridor, but we keep our teeth." Ensign Rhea's voice was crisp. Ensign Rhea said, "Plotting path, threading between active kill zones." Holt's tone carried no trust. Commander Holt said, "Weapons on safety. Safety's off." The fleet banked as one, turning toward the shadowed lane between drifting wrecks. Between volleys, the stars seemed to hold their breath. The war did not end. It simply stepped aside for a choice that could cut deeper than any battle. The Valiant slid through the debris corridor, ancient wreckage drifting like frozen corpses under a dead sun. Admiral Kalen said, "Keep us tight to the center line. Any drift could cut us open." Ensign Rhea's hands skimmed her console, eyes locked ahead. Ensign Rhea said, corridor width narrowing, adjusting lateral thrusters. Commander Holt's gaze was a steel blade fixed on the sensor readout. Commander Holt said, "Some of this wreckage isn't from one war. We're sailing through centuries." Kalen's tone carried no comfort. Admiral Kalen said, "Then let's not become part of the history lesson." The dead moon loomed larger, its gravity tugging at the fleet's formation. Admiral Kalen said, "Compensate before it eats our approach." Ensign Rhea adjusted with precision. Ensign Rhea said, "Trajectory shift by 0.3 degrees holding stable." Holt's eyes stayed forward. Commander Holt said, "Feels like this rock's breathing on us." The craters deepened into black wells as they neared. A flickering beacon appeared on a ridge, a lonely pulse in the dark. Kalen's gaze narrowed. Admiral Kalen said, "There's our marker. But nothing that close is ever alone." The moon's horizon rolled upward as they closed in, shadows spilling like liquid night. Admiral Kalen said, "Easy on the descent. We're not here to scare them." Ensign Rhea scanned continuously. Ensign Rhea said, "Surface reads unstable, several hollow zones beneath us." Holt armed the secondary batteries. Commander Holt said, "If it's a trap, I'd rather meet it loaded." The beacon's source emerged, a shattered comm tower, skeletal and scorched. Around it, metallic shards drifted lazily, catching faint sunlight. A massive shadow crossed the gap between them. Kalen's breath slowed. Admiral Kalen said, "We've just been noticed." The shadow sharpened into a vessel, sleek, matte black, surface shifting like liquid under light. Admiral Kalen said, "Rhea, talk to me." Ensign Rhea said, "No registry match, no transponder, no known drive signature." Holt's jaw locked. Commander Holt said, "It's flanking us slow, like it's studying every plate." The alien craft's edges glowed faint red, seams breathing in time with some unseen rhythm. Kalen's voice dropped. Admiral Kalen said, "Shields at ready, weapons cold. They fire first, they regret it." The Valiant's shield shimmered, catching drifting dust like faint snowfall. The alien ship halted, panels along its hull unfolding like petals of a black flower. From its core, a thin, unwavering beam of white light speared toward the Valiant's hull. Admiral Kalen said, "Scan or targeting lock?" Ensign Rhea's voice tightened. Ensign Rhea said, "No spike in energy output, patterns unlike anything in our archives." Holt's hand hovered over weapons release. Commander Holt said, "Feels like a dare." The comm hissed, and a single mechanical word broke through. Voice said, "Choose." Kalen's lips thinned. Admiral Kalen said, "We'll choose, but on our terms." The white beam from the alien vessel flickered, patterns rippling along the Valiant's hull like breathing light. Admiral Kalen said, "Cut active scans now." Ensign Rhea's fingers danced across her console. Ensign Rhea said, "Switching to passive, sir." Commander Holt muttered, "Feels like they're stripping us down layer by layer." A low hum crawled through the deck, settling in their bones. The alien petals shifted slightly, revealing void black cavities between them. Admiral Kalen said, "Either they're opening a door, or aiming a weapon." Ensign Rhea said, "Energy reading is steady, no spike yet." Kalen's eyes never left the alien craft. Admiral Kalen said, "Steady hands. Let's see what they show us." The beam cut abruptly, plunging the corridor into shadow. Admiral Kalen said, "Damage report." Ensign Rhea said, "Hull intact, but, sir, our nav map just rewrote itself." Commander Holt's brow furrowed. Commander Holt said, They've dropped coordinates right into our core. Rhea turned her screen for Kalen to see, a shimmering arc into uncharted space. The alien vessel rotated slowly, unhurried, gliding toward the far side of the moon. Admiral Kalen said, "They want us to follow." Holt's voice was tight. Commander Holt said, "And if it's a trap?" Admiral Kalen said, "Then we spring it on our terms." The Valiant fell in behind the alien vessel, both sliding past the dead moon's shadow. Admiral Kalen said, "Maintain half a click distance." Ensign Rhea said, "Course locked." Commander Holt adjusted shields. "Commander Holt," said Half Power, "save the rest for whatever's waiting." The corridor opened into a drifting field of fractured asteroids. Light from a distant sun grazed jagged edges, sending shards of brilliance across Kalen's visor. Admiral Kalen said, "Eyes open. This is where predators like to sleep." An asteroid ahead cracked apart, revealing a hollow core. Inside, a metallic structure coiled like a sleeping serpent. Admiral Kalen said, "Rhea readings." Ensign Rhea said, "Ancient power signatures, still active." Commander Holt's hand hovered over the weapons board. "Commander Holt," said, "Station or trap, sir." The alien ship glided straight in without pause. Kalen's eyes narrowed. Admiral Kalen said, "We're not here to linger outside." Holt exhaled sharply. Commander Holt said, "We're going in blind." Admiral Kalen said, "Better blind together than alone." Inside the asteroid, the walls glowed faintly with veins of luminous mineral, casting ghostlight over both ships. Admiral Kalen said, "Feels like we're inside something alive." Ensign Rhea said, "Movement along the walls. Multiple points." Commander Holt's jaw tightened. Commander Holt said, "If it moves, it's a target." The alien ship hovered over a massive black platform studded with alloy spires. Kalen's voice lowered. Admiral Kalen said, "No, this isn't a mine. It's an invitation." The Valiant eased forward, her shadow mingling with the aliens. The platform shimmered, and tall figures emerged from the mineral light, 8 feet in height, robed in black threaded with silver, faces hidden behind masks of polished glass. Admiral Kalen said, "All stations hold fire." Ensign Rhea said, "Multiple life signs. Readings non-human, sir." Commander Holt's fingers curled on the weapons console. Commander Holt said, "Say the word," and Kalen cut him off. Admiral Kalen said, "No, we watch first." The tallest figure raised a long-fingered hand, palm outward, and a pulse of soft light swept over the Valiant. The deck vibrated, not in threat, but as if weighed and measured. Admiral Kalen said, "Either a scan or a greeting." The lead figure stepped forward, mask glinting like frozen starlight. Voice through comm said, "Your war spills into our cradle." Admiral Kalen said, "We fight to survive, not to desecrate." The alien tilted its head. Voice said, "Survival without balance ends in ruin." Ensign Rhea's eyes darted to the Admiral, silently asking if this was a trap. Commander Holt muttered, "They're not diplomats. Look at the way they move. Fighters." Kalen's gaze stayed locked on the leader. Admiral Kalen said, "Then, speak your terms. My time is measured in lives." The alien leader gestured, and the black alloy spires shifted, projecting a vast map into the cavern. Red sectors bled into blue territory, with dozens of unmarked zones. Voice said, "Your conflict is one thread in a greater weave." Admiral Kalen said, "Then show me the loom." The map spun, revealing a convergence point where crimson zones converged in uncharted space. Ensign Rhea said, "That's beyond our navigation range unless—" Holt cut her off. Commander Holt said, "Or it's a perfect kill box." The alien's mask turned slowly toward him but said nothing. The alien leader's voice deepened. Voice said, "If the convergence falls, neither your species nor mine will endure." Admiral Kalen said, "What do you want in return?" Silence filled the hall, stretching into tension. Finally, Voice said, "A champion to stand where no human has stood." Ensign Rhea turned sharply toward Kalen. Ensign Rhea said, "They mean you." Commander Holt said, "Sir, you're not considering this." Admiral Kalen said, "I am, because if they're right, this war isn't just ours." The alien leader's mask dipped, like a bow. Kalen stepped into the hollow field, his image magnified before the alien gathering. Admiral Kalen said, "If this is the only way to keep my people alive, I'll stand where you ask." The alien leader's mask tilted slightly, light tracing its edges. Voice said, "Then your trial begins now." The spires flared, and the platform beneath Kalen's projection dissolved into cascading starlight. Ensign Ree's voice cracked through comms, "Sir, we're losing your signal." Kalen's last words before vanishing were calm, certain. Admiral Kalen said, "Hold the line until I return." Kalen's vision cleared as the beam faded, revealing a barren plain beneath a fractured violet sky. Shards of broken planets hung motionless above, casting long, jagged shadows. Admiral Kalen said, "Not real, but real enough." His breath came in visible bursts despite the still air. The ground beneath him was glassed black rock, split by glowing fissures that pulsed like a heartbeat. A massive shape moved in the distance, low and deliberate. Ensign Ree's voice, faint and distorted, whispered, "Sir, we're losing you." Kalen scanned the horizon. Admiral Kalen said, "Then I walk this part alone." The massive shape resolved into a quadrupedal beast armored in black crystal, molten gold eyes fixed on him. Admiral Kalen said, "So you're the test." The alien voice echoed, "Survive and advance." The creature's claws scored molten grooves into the stone as it approached. Kalen glanced for cover. Only jagged, glowing spires offered shelter. He drew his sidearm, small against the living fortress. Commander Holt's faint voice crackled, "That's not enough firepower, sir." Kalen smirked despite himself. Admiral Kalen said, "It'll have to be." Kalen fired 3 shots, each hit sparking harmlessly off the beast's armor. Admiral Kalen said, "Figures." The creature lunged with shocking speed, claws slicing through where he'd been. Kalen dove behind a spire, heat from a nearby fissure searing the air. Ensign Ree's voice cut in through static energy spikes in those fissures. They might overload. Kalen's eyes narrowed as the idea formed. Admiral Kalen said, "Let's see if you like fire." The beast's roar vibrated through the ground, a sound that felt older than stars. Kalen jammed the sidearm's barrel into the fissure, triggering an overload in its core. The spire exploded outward, sending molten shards into the beast's flank. Admiral Kalen said, "Now we're talking." The creature staggered but did not fall, its roar shaking the fractured sky. Commander Holt's voice was sharp, "Sir, keep moving." Kalen sprinted toward another fissure, boots slipping on scorched glass. The beast pursued, rage turning its movements savage and erratic. Kalen reached the second fissure just as the beast closed the gap. He dove sideways, firing into the molten core. The explosion was brighter, a wave of heat flattening him to the ground. When the haze cleared, the beast lay shattered, its armor fractured into cooling shards. The alien voice returned, calm now. Voice said, strength tempered by precision, "Proceed." Kalen rose slowly, uniform scorched, breath ragged. Admiral Kalen said, "One trial down." Ensign Ree's faint voice answered, "We'll be ready for the next." The trial plane dissolved into blinding light, and Kalen found himself on a steel floor that curved upward into infinity. Mirrors rose in a perfect circle, each taller than star cruisers, their surfaces alive with shifting scenes. Admiral Kalen said, "Tricks and illusions." The alien voice replied, "Reflections of truth." In the nearest mirror, he saw himself years younger, signing an evacuation order for a colony he had vowed to defend. Ensign Ree's faint voice whispered through static, "Sir, that wasn't your fault." Kalen's jaw tightened. Admiral Kalen said, "Fault or not, I live with it." The reflected Kalen stared back, his eyes filled with accusation. Another mirror rippled to life. The Valiant's bridge lay in ruins, fires guttering in 0G. Her crew slumped lifeless over consoles. Ensign Rhea was among them, her face half hidden in shadow. Voice said, "Every choice you make ends in loss." Kalen stepped closer, until his own reflection loomed before him, lips moving in perfect sync. Reflection said, "You will fail them again." Kalen's fists clenched, knuckles whitening. Admiral Kalen said, "Then I fail fighting." The glass shuddered, hairline fractures racing across the image, until it burst into shards of cold light that dissolved before hitting the ground. The mirrors sank into the floor, leaving Kalen surrounded by darkness until a glowing holographic star map rose around him. Hundreds of red enemy markers pulsed, closing in on scattered blue icons. Voice said, "Command them. But every move you make condemns another." Kalen's eyes tracked the shifting pieces. Admiral Kalen said, "You want sacrifice? I'll give you strategy." Ensign Rhea's voice was faint. "They're not simulations, sir. They're possible futures." Kalen moved pieces, placing destroyers in narrow corridors to lure enemy ships into overlapping fields of fire, shielding civilian convoys at the map's edge. As Kalen adjusted the fleet, more red markers bloomed without warning. Voice said, "Adapt or perish." He rerouted frigates to block flanks, sacrificing 2 destroyers to cover a medical convoy. Commander Holt's voice cut in faintly, "Sir. That's 300 crew." Kalen's tone sharpened. Admiral Kalen said, "And 10,000 souls saved." The map's red clusters fractured into fading sparks as enemy formations collapsed. Kalen's shoulders eased, but only slightly. Admiral Kalen said, "Victory never comes clean. Never." The holomap dimmed, leaving Kalen alone in a narrow beam of pale light. Voice said, "You have strength and will. But will you still stand when the choice is not yours to make?" Ahead, an immense door of carved stone and alloy began to split, constellations etched into its surface glowing faintly. Admiral Kalen said, "If the next test is worse, then open it now." The doors parted to reveal a vast chamber bathed in starlight, a throne of warship hull metal waiting at its center. Ensign Rhea's voice, soft and distant, "Sir, whatever's in there, don't let it decide for you." Kalen stepped into the starlit hall, boots ringing against metal, older than his homeworld. The alien leader stood by the throne, its mask reflecting constellations unknown to humankind. Voice said, "This seat commands a fleet, unlike yours, Admiral." Admiral Kalen said, "A fleet of what? Allies or weapons?" Voice replied, "Both, depending on the will of its master." The words settled over him like armor he hadn't chosen. Ensign Rhea's faint voice bled through static, "Sir, wherever you are, just come back to us." Kalen looked at the throne, then at the alien leader. Admiral Kalen said, "I'll come back, but I can't promise the same galaxy." The alien leader gestured, and visions bloomed in the air, worlds thriving under shared banners, oceans clean again, cities glittering. Admiral Kalen said, "That's your promise." The vision shifted to fleets burning, both human and alien, the sky a furnace. Voice said, "That is your failure." Kalen's brow furrowed. Admiral Kalen said, "And the difference between the two is me?" Voice replied, "The throne amplifies intent, but obeys only its occupant." Kalen's hand hovered above the armrest, every muscle taut. Ensign Rhea's voice cracked in over comms, "Sir, if this changes you, we'll follow or fight, but we'll never stop you alone." Kalen sat, and the hall flared alive, light racing across walls like veins in a living heart. Outside, the asteroid's mineral lines ignited, visible for light years. Ensign Rhea said, "Sir, the whole sector just lit up." Voice said, "You have taken command." Kalen felt systems merging with his thoughts, fleet rosters, weapon arrays, star charts blooming in his mind like constellations. Admiral Kalen said, "Then we use this not for conquest but for survival." The alien leader's head inclined, a gesture between respect and warning. Voice said, "Intent is pure. For now." The throne dissolved the walls into a vast holographic void, where human and alien fleets hovered side by side, and the enemy armada loomed beyond. Admiral Kalen said. Open a corridor. Let our fleets move together. The alien leader said, they are not ready for unity. Admiral Kalen said, neither were we for war, and yet here we stand. Orders flowed from his mind into the fleets, shields overlapping, formations locking like gears. Ensign Rhea's voice sharpened, enemy formation breaking. Kalen's eyes tracked every ripple. Admiral Kalen said, press the advantage, but keep the door open for the ones who run. The last enemy ship fractured into molten shards, drifting into the void. The throne hall fell silent, but for the hum of power. The alien leader stepped forward. Voice said, the cradle is safe. For now. Admiral Kalen rose slowly, the glow fading from his eyes. Admiral Kalen said, we've bought time. Let's not waste it. Ensign Rhea's voice was softer now, sir. Welcome back. Outside, human and alien vessels floated together, weapons lowered but not forgotten. Kalen stood at the threshold of the throne, looking out into a galaxy that suddenly felt both fragile and boundless. Admiral Kalen said, the war is over. For now. The next one will be ours to choose.